Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Regina Yao, and I'm the founder and president of the Pixel Project. Today, I'm moderating the second Google Hangout of the 5th International Women's Day edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 14 award-winning best-selling women writers to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end gender-based violence alive and kicking, as well as to help us reveal our first mystery celebrity male role model portrait in our Celebrity Male Role Model Pixel Reveal campaign. So we'll be telling you a little more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser, which has lots and lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little later in this session. And you can find out more about the Pixel Project and about violence against women by visiting www.thepixelproject.net. So today we have a very special guest, and we'll be doing a live Read for Pixels discussion and Q&A session with the USA Today bestselling author of more than 25 romance novels, Victoria Dow. And she's also known as Victoria Helen Stone for her best-selling mysteries and thrillers. And she's also the winner of the prestigious American Library Association 2016 Reading List Award for Outstanding Genre Fiction. She currently writes suspense as the #1 Amazon bestseller, Victoria Helen Stone. So Victoria has generously donated a couple of exclusive treats for US-based donors to the stash of author goodies that we have up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. And the first treat is her Ultimate Romance Goodie Bundle. These are one set of the Girls Night Out trilogy in paperback, one set of the Jackson trilogy, and one Jackson Wyoming mug to go with it. So you can, pour yourself a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, and have it while you read the books, enjoy the books. But if romance is not your jam, or you want to add some extra spices reading this summer, Victoria has a special treat for mystery thriller lovers. That's a Victoria Helen Stone thrilling book bundle, which has Evelyn Ever After, Half Past, Jane Doe, and the ARC of False Step. And all the books are paperback and signed and personalized. There's only one of each. And guess what? The Victoria Helen Stone thriller bundle has been snapped up by Chinami Worth, who donated a cool 100 to us. Thank you so much, Chinami. I'm going to put Victoria on here. So we're all going to say thanks to Chinami. And please give generously.
Thank you so much, Chinami.
Yeah, so there's one more. The Ultimate Romance Goodie Bundle is still available, and that's for 150 donation. So if you are interested, everybody, please head on over to our fundraising page, and we will share information about the fundraising page at the end of this discussion session. And so if you are watching this session on YouTube right now, you will also be able to ask Victoria questions live. It's kind of like a live stream AMA. Ask me anything. Just make sure you're logged in YouTube account so that you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of the YouTube screen. And today's producers, Danisha and Anusha, will be reading them and relaying them to me to read out to Victoria to answer. And now, over to Victoria. Welcome to Read for Pixels, Victoria.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so you will be reading from your book, Jane Doe. It's going to be quite a harrowing excerpt from Jane Doe about a domestic abuser and how he behaves. And so we are going to issue a trigger warning for this, because if you are watching this and if you are a domestic violence survivor or an intimate partner violence survivor, if you feel that this would trigger you, because it is quite precise, we've read it, it is very accurate for many cases. If this would trigger you, if you think it'll trigger you, go get a cup of coffee for the next 10 minutes, go to the bathroom, go get some tea, go get some fresh air, come back in 10 minutes. And so over to you, Victoria, for the reading.
All right, thank you so much. I should also say there's discussion of suicide in this excerpt and in the book in general, so just another warning on that. I'm going to be reading from Jane Doe. I guess the description of this book would be Jane Doe is a sociopath whose only friend in life has died, and she has created a new identity for herself in order to exact the perfect revenge on the person that she holds responsible. So that's where we are in the story. Here we go. I gasp as Stephen pulls into his driveway. Oh my God, what a beautiful yard. Thank you. The garage door rises and I see that the garage is perfectly clean, tools hung on walls and shelves neatly lined with boxes. Everything is so pretty and it seems like such a great neighborhood. It's nice. There are a lot of older folks here, so there aren't too many obnoxious kids around. But the school district is one of the best, so home values are solid. He's so cold and practical that I have trouble imagining what free spirit Meg saw in him. She'd never thought about home values or school districts during her walks around town. She'd liked pretty trim and brightly painted porches, but opposites attract, I suppose. His serious and responsible nature had felt like safety to her. She told me he was the best boyfriend she'd ever had. He had a job and a home. He paid for all their dates. He came from a good family. He wanted a better life for her. I could see why she believed that at first. Compared to her previous boyfriends, he'd been a catch. She'd had a bad habit of collecting weirdos and taking care of them. She'd collected me, hadn't she? Stephen had just been so strong. That's what she'd said. He tricked her with that, and then he'd overwhelmed her completely. She'd been so proud of the way he'd revamped her finances and set up electronic payments in all her accounts. I'm so bad with money, she'd started saying constantly. I'd never heard her say that before. She'd seemed fine to me. She'd supported herself. Had her own apartment, her own car, her own life. After Stephen, it was always, he says I need to learn to be more responsible. Whenever I'd snorted in response, she defended him. I had 2 overdrafts last month, Jane, 2. I was so embarrassed when he found out. Do you know how much all those fees added up to? I'm so stupid. You're not stupid. And how did he even find out? What do you mean? Why does he know anything about your checking account? He's balancing it for me now. Meg, I'd said flatly. No way. Jane, come on. I'm terrible with numbers and he's getting all my stuff in order for me. It's great. It's not great. You've been dating this guy for 2 months and now he has access to your bank account? She'd laughed. What's he going to do? Wire himself $25 and clear me out? I've got nothing. I've got nothing, she'd said, but it wasn't true. She may not have had a savings account or a big spotless house or a perfectly raked yard, but she'd had warmth and friends and a heart. Stephen lost Meg, but somehow he still looks around at his neat suburban life and thinks he's winning. Is this a rental? I ask as he unlocks the kitchen door. No way. A mortgage is an investment. Renting is just throwing money at someone else's bank account. Dumb as rocks. Well, sure, but a lot of us have to rent. You have to have a down payment to even think about buying, and you have to cover all the maintenance and taxes. You're covering the owner's taxes and all the maintenance on other units when you pay rent. You get that, right? Whatever, I couldn't afford to buy anyway. That's why you need a better job, Jane. You'll never get ahead as a temp. You're 30 years old and you're just treading water and making someone else rich. You've never had a good family to teach you this stuff. You've never had a good family? Who says that kind of thing? Yeah, I murmur, maybe you're right. He turns on the lights and hangs his keys on a hook in the wall. I step into the kitchen and look around. Wow, it's so nice. Thanks. You keep it so clean. You're not messy, are you? That drives me crazy. No, I'm not messy. Just to push his buttons, I take off my sweater and toss it onto a chair, then drop my purse on the kitchen table. His eyes go right to the mess I created and stay there. I'm very proud of myself for not laughing. So you're cooking for me, I ask? That's very romantic. I'm a pretty romantic guy. I flash back to that night in his truck and don't say a word. Stephen washes his hands and tips his head toward the sliding glass door I broke into this morning. Let me heat up the grill. I did my best to latch the lock behind me when I left, but I'm not sure I got it hooked well. So I rushed for the door while he's still moving toward it. Oh, a real backyard. I've lived in apartments so long, I've forgotten what that's like. I opened the door as I gush over his square of lawn. Oh, Burr, it's getting cold out here. A beer and a warm grill will take care of that. Hope you like steak. Of course, I respond as he steps out to fire up the propane. All right, we'll let that heat up. Let me get you a beer. I follow him back inside, and he pops open 2 beers and hands me one. Mine is light beer. His is a stout. I'm honestly beginning to think he doesn't like my weight. He carries a couple of coasters into the living room, and we sink into the giant cushions of his beige couch. He added brown pillows to really amp up the color theme of mud and feces. This is nice, he murmurs as he tucks me under his arm and pulls me close. I think it's our 2-week anniversary. Is it? I have no idea, but it's close enough, so I nod. Then happy anniversary, babe. With any other man, I'd be moving too fast, but I'm taking my cues from Meg. She'd claimed they were madly in love after only 1 week, and if Stephen thinks I'm needy and desperately romantic, he'll read it as easy to control. He kisses my cheek and settles into the couch with a satisfied sigh. Stephen, can I ask you something? Sure. When we were at church, your dad mentioned unpleasantness. He shrugs and raises his eyebrow in question. He said how nice it was to meet me after all that unpleasantness. Oh, right. What did he mean? He takes a hard swig from his beer and frowns as if it's filled his mouth with bitterness. Yeah, well, my last girlfriend was a crazy bitch. I'm ready for this. I don't smash him in the head with my beer. I don't even claw his face with my nails. Instead, I just gasp a little as if I'm mildly dismayed. Oh no. Yeah, it was pretty bad. How so? He shrugs again. Typical crazy female stuff. So she's a psycho? You're kind of freaking me out. No, I mean, yeah, but you don't have to worry. She's not going to follow me home and slash my tires? He flashes a charming smile. You don't have a car. You know what I mean. Should I be worried? No. How can you be sure? She killed herself. He says it without flinching. The words are straightforward and not tinged with the slightest haze of guilt. What? My voice is tinged with all sorts of things, and none of them are real. Shock, doubt, pity, terror. I make my eyes wide and cover my parted lips with a shaky hand. Stephen, what? Yeah, I broke up with her and she killed herself to get back at me. But, my God, she must have been a crazy damn bitch. She'd loved this man. He'd never deserved it, but Meg had loved him. She'd died for his love. He'd kicked her out of his house again, screamed at her that it was over. He told her to go screw someone else so she'd know deep in her heart he was never going to touch her again. He'd thrown her things into the street. Not in front of his house, of course. That would have been embarrassing. No, he boxed up her belongings and dropped them on the curb outside her job to humiliate her in front of her coworkers. Why? Because a man from work had called and invited her to his place for a barbecue, along with every other coworker. That was it. A man had called, but she'd been too friendly on the phone, apparently, and the man was taller and hotter than Stephen, and that had been Meg's downfall. Because she was a whore. Because she'd always been a whore. Because she was such a slut that she didn't even know how to behave appropriately around men. Did you hear how you spoke to him? Did you hear your stupid giggling? It sounds like you two are already screwing. Sure, Meg, go over to his house and slut it up. I'll just stay here and work my ass off for everything we have. You're so messed up and disrespectful. I can't believe I considered marrying you. I know exactly what he'd said because she sent me screen grabs of the text later that day. I want to kill him right now. I want to break my bottle on his coffee table and stab him in the jugular and then drag him outside so I can press his face to the grill and burn him while he dies. But I shake my head and keep my mouth covered. Let's not talk about her, he finally sighs. But how long ago did it happen? Last year, he answers curtly, and that's not true. It happened 9 months ago, in the middle of February, when Meg couldn't face the long nights and gray days. I told her a UV lamp would help her feel better. Apparently, I was way off base. I don't want to talk about this, Stephen mutters. But Stephen, this is a big deal. You must still be reeling. I prayed a lot. I got over it. But I don't understand why she killed herself. Did you break her heart? Were you cheating on her? No way. I found out she was slutting around with guys at her job and I kicked her out. She realized she'd screwed up the best thing she ever had. When I wouldn't take her back, she wanted to punish me. By killing herself? His shoulders jerk up in a violent shrug. She probably did it for attention. Figured she'd take a few pills and I'd come running back. I guess she messed that up too. He still wants to let everyone know Meg couldn't do anything right. She couldn't even die correctly. I swallow my rage and keep my frown soft and trembling. But you must have loved her, I say quietly, pretending I know what sympathy is. You must be grieving. I'm not sure if I've genuinely hit a nerve or if he realizes he's being callous, but Stephen slumps a little. I did love her, but she wasn't a good person. She was irresponsible and she slept around. I wanted to help her, but you can't help people who won't help themselves. Meg was a great person. That's not sentimentality. I don't have that. She'd never been perfect, but she'd been kind, even to someone like me. She must have had good qualities if you dated her. Yeah, she was fun, he offered, and you know what they say about crazy girls with low self-esteem. They're great in bed. He'd been her lover, her boyfriend. He'd spoken at her funeral. I hadn't flown in for the service, but I'd heard about it from her mom. Stephen had stood in front of God and country and said he'd tried to save her from her demons. He'd called her a light in his life. He'd wept and sobbed. Now all he had to say about his precious angel was that her low self-esteem made her great in bed. Meg had put up with his tantrums. She'd stroked his ego and done her best to please and appease him. Why? Are we all just animals bound to relive our broken childhoods over and over? Is it that simple? Meg's real father treated his family like crap before he left, and every stepdad and boyfriend who'd followed did the same. Her mom had spent her life pleasing men, and that had imprinted on Meg, the way hunting skills imprinted on young lions. This is how you get through life. This is how you guarantee the species. Take abuse, submit to men, repeat, repeat, repeat. Meg had broken this cycle, finally.
All right, that was intense. And it covered, I'm just going to say, as someone who's been working in the anti-violence against women movement for the last 10 years, that describes abusive behavior to a T. Emotionally abusive, financially controlling, everything. Now, we've already got a couple of remarks on the audience. I'm going to read them out to you because they were listening, definitely listening. Kate Duncan says, loves Jane Doe. Glad to have found your books, Victoria. And Anusha Kandasivam says, if a guy has lots of ex-girlfriends who he calls crazy bitches, I say, air quotes, just he's the crazy one. He's the common denominator in the relationships. And this is so true.
Yeah.
And, in the excerpt.
Thank you so much for reading, by the way. I appreciate it. And thank you for the comments.
Yeah. And before we continue, if you have just joined us, welcome to Victoria Dow / Victoria Helen Stone's live Google Hangout with the Pixel Project on our Read for Pixels campaign. If you just joined us, please do log into your YouTube account so that you can join in the conversation in the chat box. You can type your questions in there, and our moderators and producers Anusha Kandasivam and Danisha Rajendran will relay your questions to me to read out to Victoria to answer in between the discussion session that is just beginning now. And you write books in two very different genres. And no matter what genre you read, in all your stories feature complex female protagonists. And in the excerpt from Jane Doe that you just read, you describe Jane as a sociopath. And we were chatting before we got on air, and you say that you love turning tropes around, you love twisting things around. And Jane sounds a bit like Dexter, where he's a sociopath too, but they are turning their sociopathic tendencies towards avenging people and doing what's right. And she's avenging her friend who this, I'm not going to say all the bad words on air, this monster has driven to suicide, has basically killed. And, you pretty accurately, described what a lot of abusive men are like and how they control the women that they're in relationships in. What steps did you take to ensure that violence against women in your books is presented realistically and effectively without falling back into lazy tropes that make the female characters, a vehicle for man pain?
Right. I think in general, I try to portray violence against women, certainly if it's in a character's past, through her eyes, instead of, for example, a male savior who's seen it or experiencing it for the first time. I want to portray it through her eyes and her voice, what she's gone through, how it affected her, how she came out on the other side of it. Jane was a very interesting way to process trauma because she is a sociopath. So she can look at everything very objectively. Like, she can see what the abusive traits are because she doesn't have any affection for him. She doesn't have sympathy for him. And she can see, as a sociopath and somebody who manipulates people on a regular basis, exactly how her friend was being manipulated. So, I just try to portray it not through the male gaze, and not even so much as a victim, but as a survivor, I think, to how somebody got through it, or how they dealt with that kind of trauma.
Yeah. And, and because a lot of authors that we've hosted before, they have talked about writing the abuse in a way that looks at the consequences, that does not ignore the consequences. And your whole book, Jane Doe, is basically not ignoring the consequences of what happened to Jane's friend, because Jane takes action. And it is really interesting because, like you said, that because she's a sociopath and she does not have access to certain emotions, that she is able to literally almost surgically actually look at it. It's almost like a case study for her, and then she just decides, this is what I'm going to do, and she carries it out. Yeah. So violence against women seems to be a pervasive element of many mystery and thriller genres and subgenres. But your Victoria Helen Stone books, they buck the trend because, like you said, you center your female protagonists. You look at things through their eyes, and you give them the will and the agency to take control of their lives, despite being affected by, emotional or psychological or physical violence. Do you think it is possible for authors in the genre to write stories that don't involve violence against women?
I think it is. My first book in this genre was Evelyn After, and there was a death in the story, but that was just sort of an inciting. It was a hit. Actually, that's a spoiler alert. But the story itself, what the women in the story are going through, are more about emotional trauma, betrayal, and being gaslighted, that sort of thing. And it's more like woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown, like confronting something terrible happening in her marriage and in her life, and spiraling out of control, doing bad things in response to that. I think that's another one of my favorite things to do when I'm writing female characters, is that they're not perfect. They're not the perfect victim. They're not the perfect lover or spouse. It's complicated. So when people are thrust into stressful situations, they behave in ways that they wouldn't normally behave. So yeah, my first book, Evelyn After, was more about emotional trauma and psychological trauma and dealing with that, as opposed to there were no guns, there was no stabbing, nobody was, being terrorized in that way. And then my second book in this genre, Half Past, was about a woman who finds out that her parents that are not her parents, and she never knew that before, and she's going back into the past to figure out, where she came from. So again, it's very dark and it's mysterious, but it's not about a serial killer or literal violence against women. So.
Yeah. And when you said just now, it struck me. You said not the perfect victim. Mm. And this resonates, especially since Me Too is still going on right now. Right. Like people seem to demand that survivors be the perfect victim before they get any empathy or sympathy. And it's not going to happen because, I mean, look at all the, recently, I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but 1 or 2 days ago, reports came out that in Argentina, 11-year-old had been raped by her grandmother's 65-year-old boyfriend. And the government just forced her to give birth at age 11. She was so young that they had to do a C-section. And it's like, there is no perfect victim. Right. If you're going to move forward with this, I think that's an important acknowledgement, and your books acknowledge that in order to move forward, in order to get reparations of some kind or another, we have to acknowledge that women aren't perfect either. Yeah.
Well, and the most horrifying thing about that is that the most vulnerable women are the ones who the victims are chosen sometimes because they won't be believed, because they're addicted to drug, but because bad things have happened to them in the past, because they're poor, because maybe they've made some bad choices in their life, and because they're vulnerable. I can do something to her. I can do something bad to her and nobody will care. And unfortunately, that's true. And you can see that thankfully, that's changed recently, but with sex workers, a lot of those murders are never even looked into because people just throw them away. Nobody cares about them. And people who have been in abusive relationships in the past are going to obviously more likely to be in an abusive, a bad dynamic in the future. And, you hear these things about, I can't remember. There was a story recently where a woman said, a politician had raped her in college. And then the story turned into, she accused some other guy of rape before. And she said that he said specifically, I chose you because I knew nobody would believe you because they didn't believe you the first time. So yeah, the idea of there being a perfect victim and that people only ever care about women who go missing if they're white. That's really, really disturbing and upsetting. And I try to create complicated characters in romance and thrillers, women who are not perfect in any way, and they still deserve love, and they still deserve to be cared about when they're victims. So.
Yeah, and when you mentioned about not believing rape victims, we recently shared an article on Facebook. Kim Ellsworth is an activist and a lawyer, attorney, I think, and in law enforcement in Detroit, and they discovered that in one county alone, 11,000 rape kits not tested, and there was something like over 800 serial rapists that they found.
Oh my God!
They started testing it. You can go to our Facebook page later. Everyone, you can go if you're on Facebook. Go to just type in the Pixel Project. You can see us and just scroll down a little bit. We tested that. No, not we tested. We shared that about 2 or 3 days ago, and the majority of the rape kits that were not tested were women of color.
Right.
Women of color. So it is.
I think I remember hearing something about that because one woman said that her rape kit did get tested only because she was the niece of a mayor or somebody important, and So they had to do something, but otherwise the default was just doing nothing.
And he stuck them all in warehouses,
Yeah.
all the kids. And, you know, it took a very determined, you know, activist, you know, lawyer. You know, it took a very determined person and her friends to just, you know, who are in the position to do so, to just, you know, pull all of that out and start going through everything.
Yeah.
And there is no perfect victim.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect. That's part of being human, right? Nobody's perfect. So, you know, coming back to the genre thing, so violence gets built into the mystery of thriller genre. You know, people die, people get hurt, and especially those with a strong suspense element such as yours. When you write your mystery and thrillers, how do you find the balance between showing the violence as part of the story, but not showing violence for its own sake?
Right. Hold on, let me think about what I just wrote. I think most of my violence takes place off of the page. It's something that happened in the past or something that is an inciting incident for the story. Thinking back, there may have been, one of my first romances that was published. It was my first romance. It was called To Tempt a Scotsman. And there's a scene at the end where there's a bad guy stalker and he kidnaps her. And she, in order to get him to let his guard down, she agrees that she'll have sex with him. It's rape, obviously. And they go off together like he promises he'll spare the hero's life if she does this. And then off the page, you know, he's attempting to rape her and she stabs him. And I was horrified. It was years later, one of my writing friends said something about him raping her. And I said, he didn't rape her. Like, he was distracted and she stabbed him before anything happened. And she was like, oh my God, I thought that he raped her. And then they just went on in the story like that hadn't happened. And I was so upset because I would never write something like that. But it was so off the page that she hadn't really realized what had happened. So I don't know. I have, in my latest book that's coming out, False Step, there is an incident, a brief incident of domestic violence that is on the page where a woman is slapped. And then immediately after that happens, it's all about her processing what has happened to her, what's she going to do now, her fear and self-doubt and self-loathing. So that was how I framed that violence on the page toward a woman.
Yeah. So you mentioned your romances, and so, you know, speaking of genre, you began your career writing award-winning romance novels. So some of your most memorable female protagonists include, like I told you, my favorite, Laurie Love in Starlight, Marissa York in A Little Bit Wild, and Grace Barrett in Close Enough to Touch. And they are resilient and they're determined and they make their own decisions and they navigate their own lives, and the men in their lives eventually learn to respect that, even if they did not do so in the beginning. So do you consciously create such female characters, or do they just, you know, they just appear? They happen to be story.
I love writing about strong women who go against norms. I also like to make clear that, to me, strong female characters come in many different attitudes and sizes and psychologies. I try to write very different female characters in every book. So, for example, like Grace in Close Enough to Touch, she's extremely prickly and independent and doesn't want anything to do with anybody. A lot of people did not like her, but I loved her. I mean, she was just so difficult to get close to. And then Marissa in A Little Bit Wild is just sort of loves life, bigger than life, always getting into trouble. But then I've also written much quieter characters who are shy, who are maybe not as experienced with men. So for me, I just love writing about different strengths of women, quiet strength and very bold strength. And yeah, I mean, I do that very deliberately because I love that about all of my female friends. They're all different. They're all amazing and in different ways and imperfect in different ways. And I really like to write about different kinds of female strength because I think we all deserve love and we all deserve to see ourselves on the page and to see people like us falling in love. So.
And because you do that, it sort of naturally breaks all these stereotypes that people have of romance heroines, you know. it like I said, you know, like I said with Lori Love, the reason why I loved her so much, well, pun not intended, is that she sounds like a lot of women who are, you know, generation, extended generation, millennial and younger, you know. We try our best to steer our own lives.
Right.
We don't need men to tell us what to do.
I love writing Lori Love because she's an auto mechanic. Not that I know anything about that because I don't, but just like she's, you know, kind of a, you know, really tough lady, but she's in a little packet, you know, a little small package, and she's scrappy. But you know, she's very sensitive on the inside and a little self-conscious. And I really loved writing her. I mean, she just felt like a good friend, you know? Yeah.
Do you ever feel pressured by, you know, the romance genre stereotype to make your characters likable or relatable? Happily ever afters expected. And, you know, you talked about a character who, you know, readers didn't like. Do they give you any flack for making her unlikable to them?
Unsympathetic heroine was my biggest, well, maybe it still is in the genre I'm writing now, it was the biggest criticism I got. And as a matter of fact, I think it was Start Me Up. I think it was Lori Love, where the book ended and they never said, I love you. They just agreed to start dating again and try to make it work. And my editor was like, you got to have them say, I love you. Like, and thank God I did, because even just them agreeing that they would date again, that they would start dating and try to make it work, was not enough of a, I feel like I write mostly happily for now as opposed to happily ever after, especially for contemporary stories, because for me, it's the space of the romance is usually a week or two or three or a month. And it freaks me out when people decide to get married after that amount of time, or like it freaks me out. I can't, you know. So most of my contemporaries especially would end with them just dating, you know, and things are going well. But the heroines specifically are, especially Grace in Close Enough to Touch. Oh my God, she was so prickly, and people really like, they would just keep saying like, you know, she doesn't deserve him, and she's in, like, he liked her that way. That was the thing. He liked that about her. And I love my female friends who are like that. And I was raised with some women who are like that in my life, very no nonsense and don't take any crap from anybody. But yeah, some people just don't want that. Some people don't want a sexually experienced heroine. Marissa in A Little Bit Wild, this book opens with her losing her virginity to another man. And I had so much fun writing that scene because it's not something you see that often in romance novels. So yeah, that's one of my favorite things about my characters, but not necessarily everybody's favorite thing about my characters.
Yeah, and you know, like you said, you know, women come in all shapes and sizes and all, you know, not just physically, but emotionally and personality-wise and character-wise. And, you know, everyone deserves love. Yeah. There's a fit, you know, and I think it's, with Lori, it's like the happily ever after is, what I liked about it is that it is realistic. It, you know, you don't just, like you say, you don't just, you know, after 3 weeks go, boom, we're getting married. Doesn't quite happen, you know, in modern times. But you know, brings up another question, actually. You write both contemporary and historical romance, while you wrote both. And are there different challenges to writing female characters with agency depending on the time period, or is it sort of largely similar process?
Yeah. For me, the biggest challenge in historicals, it was, I wrote one heroine who was really afraid to have children. She didn't want to have children. I would have been afraid to have children in the 19th century too. I mean, I can't, it terrifies me thinking about just doing that with no help if something goes wrong. And I can't give her birth control, really. I mean, they can maybe use condoms, but that's not a great long-term, 30-year solution. So, and that kind of thing, I would, like at the end of the book, the hero basically says, we'll try not to have kids, and I respect that. And, I don't have any qualms about that. In my contemporaries, the women are always using birth control because I get totally thrown out of a story if somebody's not using birth control. That also freaks me out. So, and that, working around those kind of issues, I was very conscious of in historicals, because there are such huge consequences if a woman gets pregnant out of wedlock in a historical. And I don't write heroes who would just willy-nilly, take that kind of chance with a woman's life. So how do you put them in a situation where they might make a mistake, but it's not totally irresponsible? That was a big issue when I was writing historicals.
Yeah, and romance is the biggest selling genre today. And it's been criticized for being anti-feminist, and of providing unrealistic portrayals of sexual and romantic relationships, which are most, we just blew all that out of the water with our discussion right now. And they've been accused of glorifying toxic relationships too. Do you think these criticisms are fair?
I mean, I think that there are toxic relationships in some romances. I think there are toxic relationships in a lot of different genres. For me, I don't experience that very often because I'm pretty careful about what romances I read, and I read a lot of romances from my friends, and they don't write those kind of books. Things like 50 Shades of Grey I find very disturbing, because those are the ones that people outside the genre point to when they want to make fun of the genre or point out how harmful it is. But for me, there are so many amazing romances with such positive storylines and positive messages for women that's what I love about the genre. The romances I read are all amazing women who are going about their life and building careers, and they just happen to meet somebody, usually at an inconvenient time. And it's about two people making it work together. It's not about the man sweeping her off her feet and making everything better. I think that's pretty boring. Yeah, and I want to say another thing about the whole bodice ripper idea of these. A lot of people have this idea of romance that it's the 1970s and 80s romances where the man is really alpha and in charge and, sort of overwhelming the woman physically and emotionally and sexually. And to me, especially in that era, those books were enjoyed by women who hadn't yet realized their own sexual agency. They hadn't realized that it was okay for women to have these desires. So for them, it was permission to read a book about a woman enjoying sex and having orgasms without challenging too much their own expectations about their lives. So I can forgive those books from that era. I think it was a way for women to access sexual stories for themselves. But nowadays, I don't appreciate the stuff that's written that way.
Yeah, and what is interesting is that maybe, I know I laugh at me, but I've noticed that some romance authors who've been writing a long time, if you follow the books in their careers, say a 20-year period,
Yeah.
you start reading from where, you know, the early books, and then you jump ahead to the books that they're writing now.
Yeah.
They change. They change the approach to everything from women's sexuality to, you know, consent, the issue of consent. And the way they write heroes change too. The type of heroes that they write changes too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it does evolve. You know, people.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to go back and read my first couple of books. I was always fairly conscious, but for example, my first book, To Tempt a Scotsman, the whole conflict in the story is the hero's jealousy, and he has to come to terms with that at the end and realize that he's been wrong. But I don't think that I would write a jealous hero nowadays. I don't think that I would be comfortable even with that being his big story arc. So yeah, I think we all evolve and learn better. Hopefully, if you're a good person.
But you know, sometimes I still, like you, I pick my, the authors I read carefully. So I read you, I read Nalini Singh, I read Beverly Jenkins. She's very good at all of this. Even her historicals, are an exercise, and it's things that I didn't know they used birth control, that sort of birth control in that time period sort of thing. Yeah. But Beverly says yes. We've had it on before, and Beverly says yes. I did my homework. They actually used the sponge. They had condoms at the time, and it's very informative, very educational. But there are still books where the line between consent and coercion isn't very clear. And do you think this is an issue that the romance community and writing and reading community have started tackling successfully in recent years?
Yeah, I love that there's a lot of discussion of consent now in the romance community, and how sexy it is to, I don't know, like there's this idea that consent is like sitting down with a piece of paper and going, okay, is it okay if I do this? But I love the portrayal of positive consent in romance, which is, do you like this? And, is this okay? Is this, not just like a, should we be doing this kind of a situation? Like it's very hot if you do it, if you write it in the correct way. I also love good writers who really push the limits. And I don't mean in the bad way, because there's the really bad way to do it. But writers like Tara McKenna, I always cite Willing Victim, which is a book about rape fantasy. But the consent is very, very clearly laid out before they ever get into this fantasy, because they're both aware that this is a fantasy. It's not about actual force and coercion. So I love the people who do it correctly. And I don't, every once in a while, I'll download a book on Kindle by an author I haven't heard of, and it gets really squicky, and it's very much about power dynamics in a bad way. And there are some power dynamics that some are my favorite tropes, but they have to be handled respectfully. And there's a lot of great authors that are doing that, and there's nothing to be done, I guess, about the ones who aren't, who aren't doing a good job of that. But we have these conversations all the time in the community.
Yeah, some authors like you, like Lisa Kleypas, like Julia Quinn, like Beverly Jenkins, you all also tackle issues ranging from domestic violence to recovering from rape to recovering from childhood sexual abuse. It's all built into the story. It doesn't affect the romance in a negative way. Actually, it adds a lot of layers to it. And you can see clearly how the heroine is recovering and getting her life back, and then and how and if the relationship moves it along. So what would your advice be to romance authors who wish to include these topics related to violence against women in their stories? What would your advice be? How regarding tackling it properly?
I guess I would say it's okay to watch a woman struggle with that internally, to watch, to have her acknowledge the damage and the self-doubt and the work that you have to, that she's had to do or she's going to have to do to get through it. I think it's really good to have conversations between the characters on page, honest conversations. And the kind of conversations that, we write fantasy men, we write heroes. So we can write a hero who is willing to listen and have that conversation in the way that we would like to see happen in real life. Just like we write the sex scenes that we'd like to see happen in real life, we can write those kind of emotional, dark scenes honestly, but the way that it should be acknowledged in a relationship, and not in a way that it's exploitative, and not in a like chest beating, I'm going to take care of you and I'm going to, you know what I mean? Like just in a, I hear you kind of a way, and tell me more, and what does this mean? And yeah, so.
Do you think the alpha male hero is going to get phased out?
I see a lot less of them than I used to, which I like. And, not that, every once in a while it's fun to read some sort of over the top kind of alpha heroes. For me, as long as he's not an alpha hole, as they say, as long as he's not abusive and controlling and overwhelming in that way. But I read so many heroes now who are, a lot of my heroes have been called beta. I don't know if that's true or not, but now what's the term? Cinnamon roll hero? Have you heard that one?
Cinnamon roll. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, nice and squishy and soft and understanding and.
Yeah. And
it's really, I'm sorry, the term nice, a lot of people don't like it, but I think it's nice. I think it's nice to, as someone who does read romance, I think it's nice to open a book and read about, after a long day dealing with, in the course of my work, dealing with, all these stories about men behaving so horribly, abusing women, abusing children, and getting away with it, and all the work that all my sisters in anti-violence against women put in. And it's so nice to, it's nice to open a book at the end of the day and go, if only more men would, ask for consent, understand what it means, like this guy, So
I have always, one of the criteria for every one of my heroes, I believe, is that they like women. They really like women. They don't hate women. They don't have a terrible past that has made them distrust women and hate them. They like them. They like being around them. They respect them, because that's who most of us are married to. My husband is a great guy who would never do any of these kind of things. And it's weird when you read about sort of like the incel kind of thing, like nice guys can't get laid or whatever that is. Like, look around you. Like, look at everybody I know is married to a nice guy, basically, for the most part. Like, and none of them are super hot studs. Like, none of them are like 6'5" and, muscular. Like, those might be the guys on the covers, and those might even be the guys in the pages, but that's just the fiction. It's like being a super spy in a book. Like, you're not really a super spy in your life. Like, it doesn't take anything away from the regular nice guys that we all love and, have relationships with.
Yeah, but even the super spies in the mystery thrillers, like we've hosted Greg Hurwitz before, and he has this, the Evan Smoke thrillers, and Evan is he's a badass, but like you said, he actually likes women as people. His mentor is an old man who taught him that women are people, women drive the economy, because mothers drive, mothers are the ones who make, raise the kids and stuff. So there's a lot of that in there, and he's still a badass.
Yeah, yeah.
He's still American James Bond badass who happens to be and likes women, does not underestimate them, respects them, treats them like people, breaks up trafficking rings,
Yeah.
And do you think that if more authors wrote characters like that, like male characters who are not toxic, don't display toxic masculinity, who understand consent, who like women, or at least treat women as people, do you think that would change? Because stories are the way that we change culture, right? Culture is made out of stories. And do you think that if more authors, regardless of genre, actually did that, do you think things would change, that we might see fewer incels?
I hope so. I think so. I mean, I do think that there are trends in genre. For example, in romance writing, there didn't used to be erotic romance, right? There was just regular romance. And then I think it was Black Lace started publishing some erotic romance, and women started reading it. And then when it really took off was when women could read ebooks, and they didn't have to go into the bookstore and get embarrassed by what the guy at the cash register said about their books. And then there's things like Sex and the City on TV. And I just feel like we've started to evolve in acknowledging and being proud of our sexuality, not being the least bit embarrassed about what we read or what we're into, or talking about female orgasm, that kind of thing. So I think, and maybe it didn't start with romance novels, I don't know, but I do think that when you start reading that kind of thing more regularly and seeing other women and love reading that kind of thing regularly, and then you can have conversations about it. Oh my God, I didn't know that you were, reading that kind of stuff too. I do think it starts to work on the bigger subconscious of society. And so I do hope that these nice guy romances maybe start having an effect that, because in writing about emotional abuse, a lot of that starts off as feeling like it's an intense romance. A guy who's very controlling, it feels like he's really into you and he just wants to be around you all the time, and he just needs to know where you are because he loves you so much. So I think it just reframing even that kind of behavior as being stalkerish and not okay, and having those kind of conversations because of books like 50 Shades of Grey, I think it really helps us move forward and get beyond that.
Yeah. And, speaking of your husband, parents are usually the most influential role models in a person's life. As a mom to 2 boys, what do you think parents can do to help prevent violence against women and girls in future generations and get boys involved in helping to do so?
I think it's really important to raise your kids with the idea that the other gender or other genders are not aliens. They're not some sort of mystery. They're not foreign. They're people, whatever gender somebody is. I think that in the past we've been raised as like boys will be boys and girls will be girls, and they don't understand each other, and they're like, especially for boys, that women are something to be acquired, something to be gotten, something to win.
Like an object, like chattel. Yeah. That's really it. No.
Yeah, I want that, and she doesn't want to give me that, so I have to do whatever I can to get, I'll get her drunk, or I'll get her alone, or I'll just keep pressing until she gives in. We're not things that you can acquire, and we're not gatekeepers who are keeping something from you that you deserve, which is a language I see a lot these days. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important for parents to teach their children that, boys and girls, but boys especially, that girls are people and you can be friends with them, and they're not there to be won or taken or tricked. So, and I think that's really important. I think it's really important to talk about consent nowadays. It's not about wearing a girl down or talking her into something. It's about you both being in the same place and wanting the same thing, and that's what you wait for.
Yeah, and before I continue that, if anyone has any questions for Victoria, now's the time to type them into the chat box so that Anusha or Denisha can relay them to me, because we are wrapping up in about 5 or 10 minutes. So everyone, any final questions? Please start typing them in now so we can get to them before we wrap up. So getting back to parenting, so your husband, you know, we talk a lot at the Pixel Project, we talk a lot about male role models, because, you know, that's why we were so dismayed, and so everyone in the anti-violence against women movement was so dismayed, you know, when Kavanaugh was appointed, despite all the efforts to stop it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what are your thoughts on, you know, dads being role models, and how has your husband handled, you know, being a role model to your sons?
I think he's always expected our boys to be kind people. He never has
really unusual in a way, because, you know, people always talk about being a man,
right?
And the first thing you're saying about what your husband expects of your sons are to know how to be kind, to be kind.
Yeah. Well, we have 2 boys, and we did not allow them to be mean to each other when they were young, in a way that, I don't know, you sometimes see that where, you know, boys are going to fight, and that's to be expected, that you might hit your brother, or you might, you know, we never allowed that in our house. And we would always say, you don't put your hands on another person if they're asking you not to, like, you know, but I think it starts with that. You don't need to talk about sexual consent. You start in your own house. Like, you don't treat people that way. If your brother says, stop touching me, then you stop touching him. Like, that's a really good place to start, because, you know, you don't have to start with about sex. It should start about respecting another person's body, boy or girl, it doesn't matter. So yeah, I mean, he's always just wanted our boys to be kind people. So yeah, I mean, I'm lucky, I guess, but I would not have, you know, that's the kind of man that I like being around. And you know.
Yeah, and your heroes, they all have sort of a strain of, not a strain, but they sort of have a thread of kindness in them. That's what I noticed.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing. I mean, it's like that old adage about, like, you should never date somebody who's mean to the servers at a restaurant. Like, that's just the base. I mean, that's just a starting point. I would never be interested in a person who was mean to anyone. So I think, you know, if that's how you raise your children, that you show kindness to others. And I think the basis of showing kindness to others is to have empathy, meaning you put yourself in their shoes. That shouldn't stop because they're a different gender than you. That's kind of horrifying, but that does seem to be like where some people stop, is this person isn't like me, so I don't know what they feel.
Yeah, what is interesting is that you're like the third author to bring that up about raising boys. Like, Brandon Sanderson actually said that he has 3 boys, I believe, and he was talking about parenting them, and that he told his boys, you know, he and his wife rammed in the exact message that you and your husband have done about, you know, yeah, you want to roughhouse and fight and stuff, but if your brother says stop, I don't want to do this anymore, you stop.
Yeah.
You don't touch people without their permission.
Yeah.
If they say no, if they say stop, for whatever reason they want you to stop, you stop.
Yeah.
And this respect should be shown to everybody, like you said, regardless of gender, regardless of any situation. Stop.
Yeah. And I have to say, I think one of the most important things, a lot of people say, well, what about boys? What about men? You know, don't you care about them? For me, toxic masculinity is so harmful to boys and men. And one of the most amazing things I've seen with this generation of kids is, for example, trying to get rid of homophobia. And it's proceeded so quickly with gay rights and recognizing other genders and sexualities. It's not a big deal to them. So I have noticed with this generation that my sons have really good male friends that they're affectionate with, that they show affection to and caring to. And I think it's going to be so much healthier for them as they're growing up to have friendships that are so deep and people they can turn to for emotional support, because they're not afraid that somebody's going to call them a gay slur if they give their friend a hug. They're not afraid that if they're too close to their best friend that people will call them gay, because they're not afraid of being called gay. They don't, you know, they have friends that are gay. Everybody, you know, they have friends that are transgender. It's not a scary thing for them to show emotion and caring anymore. And I think that's so important for this generation of boys. And I think they're going to be so much healthier as they become men.
Yeah, and there's a story going around. Someone was talking on social media about how when she first got her period in middle school, this boy who's a couple of grades older than she is, and she's known him since they were little because their families know each other. He actually pulled her aside and he has sisters too. He took out the sanitary pad and he says, come on, let's get you cleaned up and fixed up, and it's no big deal. And we'll walk home together and I'll walk behind you because it's, her skirt stained.
Yeah.
And when all the women read that, they were like, Dad, no more shame about periods. No more. Boys should not feel any shame about walking down a tampon or the women's sanitary products out.
Yeah. Well, because she's not like some sort of mysterious alien creature to him. She's a person and no different from him. So, I remember that story. It was very, very moving because when I was young, even girls didn't want to talk to other girls about that kind of thing. So,
And I think it's part of dismantling toxic masculinity, and we're seeing it in the younger kids now, is that things like this is not a big deal. It's no longer a taboo. Women and girls are increasingly seen as people in their own right. It is no longer taboo, it still is in certain cultures. Like there have been reports that women have died in Tibet and a few countries where they actually separate the women and stick them in period huts.
Yeah, I think there's a new documentary out about that. And I can't remember what it's called, but it's all about that.
And I think there's a short documentary that just won an Oscar about periods. Periods. Yeah. And so basically, I think part of seeing how toxic masculinity goes away, it's also seeing that men are no longer, the boys are going to grow up into men. And the kids who are your son's age now in college, like women's bodily functions are no longer taboo, which they were as part of segregating us as a different sex. So anyway, so we're going to wrap up. We've got one more question, and it's like a Captain Obvious question, but we always ask this. It's a two-part question. You have been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. One, why do you support the cause to end violence against women? And two, what do you think authors can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
I wanted to get involved in this cause because I think that violence against women is the most overriding crisis in the world. It happens in every culture. I think in every culture, whatever it is, women are the most vulnerable, women and girls. And I think that we were only just starting to address it and talk about it. And, the Equal Rights Amendment hasn't even passed. I just think it's so important to talk about that in regard to everything, because whatever situation, whatever crisis is happening in the world, it's going to hit women and children the hardest. So I think that that's a super important cause as a woman and as a person, obviously. And I'm sorry, what was the second question?
The second question, which is the final question, is what do you think authors can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
I think that authors can, as I've said before, stop writing about the perfect victim, start writing real women who are victims, who may not have lived perfect lives, but they still deserve our love and sympathy and support, and they still deserve justice. I think we should start including characters who being sure to write characters who are not the same color as us, not the same sexuality as us, not the same gender as us, because readers need to see those characters as sympathetic, lovable victims who also deserve justice. So I think you have to put your heart into the change that you want to see in the world, the justice that you want to see in the world. That you need to put that into your own work.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap up now. And as I promised at the beginning of this session, that we will show you how to go get Victoria's treats. Now, Victoria has, if you've joined us midway through the session, Victoria has generously donated a couple of exclusive goodie bundles for US-based donors. To the stash of the author goodies we have up as perks and rewards for donors at our Read for Pixels fundraising page. Now, the thriller book bundle has been taken. Shinami Worth has donated a cool $100 to us. And Victoria will send her those books soon. But let's get the slide up so that you all will know where to get Victoria's Ultimate Romance Goodie Bundle. So here we go. I'll put myself on screen. Hi, everybody. If you just joined us midway, you haven't seen me, you see Victoria's. Hi, this is me, the voice behind the questions. So let's do a screen share. Here we go. Tell me if you see this, Victoria.
I do see it.
Oh, here we go. So Victoria's Ultimate Romance Goodie Bundle is stuffed full of signed.
Oh, wait, I'm seeing the Read for Pixels campaign thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the bundle has one set of the Girls Night Out trilogy. It has one set of the Jackson trilogy, and it has a very awesome Jackson, Wyoming mug to go with it. So if you love to have your coffee or your tea or a cold drink, even while you're reading it, and it's gonna be summer soon in a few months, go get it. It's up now on our Rally Up fundraising page. It's bit.ly/R4P Rally Up IWD 2019. This is case sensitive, so make sure to type it in correctly. And if you want to find out about Read for Pixels as a campaign, you can go to bit.ly/Read for Pixels. Again, it's case sensitive. And if you want to find out more about violence against women, if you don't know much about it, and there are so many different types actually, you can go, and you want to know what to do if you come across it, go to our website at www.thepixelproject.net. And all funds raised go towards our work. It funds all the work, including this campaign. So our work includes connecting people with the information they need in more than 30 countries worldwide. We do not run shelters ourselves, but we do tweet every night from 8 p.m. to midnight Eastern Standard Time, and every morning from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. for North America only, and all the time zones that are there from Pacific to Eastern Time. We tweet out helplines and contact details for the shelters and rape emergency helplines and all from over 30 countries worldwide. So follow us on Twitter, just type in Pixel Project, you can find us. And we also provide all sorts of 101, we provide all sorts of information from the 101 level about how to recognize, say, domestic violence, emotional abuse, how to help rape victims. Just go to our website, www.thepixelproject.net, and every single dollar that you donate will trigger 1 pixel of our Celebrity Male Role Model Pixel Reveal campaign. And we are busy unveiling our mystery male role model, who is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and he works a lot with stopping violence against women. So let me just put Victoria back on screen so we can say bye to everybody. So Victoria, do you have any last words? Do you have anything to announce? Do you have any events coming up?
No, I don't have anything. Well, actually, I do. I just got a new contract for a second Jane Doe book, which will be called Problem Child, and that'll be out in 2020. Other than that, my next book is False Step, coming out this summer. And thank you so much for having me. This has been an amazing experience.
Yeah, thank you for joining us on our Read for Pixels Google Hangout today. This is going to be, hopefully if anyone is watching this after this as archived on our YouTube page, hopefully it'll help you think through some of the issues that you're probably wondering about, which is probably why you've clicked on this. So we'll bid everyone good night or good morning or good weekend wherever you are in the world. This is Regina signing out together with Victoria. Have a good week ahead.
Thank you.